I'm Tracy Anderson, Rise Association Marketing Coordinator. For those of you that are new, we are delighted you have joined us for today's webinar titled Best in KLAS for Risk Adjustment and Best in Class for Our Clients, presented by EXL Health. Today we are joined by Mark Bigelow and Varun Pandarathal. Thank you all for being here. Without further ado, I will let Mark and Varun take it from here.
Thank you so much, Tracy. Let me go ahead and share the presentation real quick. I appreciate everybody joining and hope that we can provide an interesting presentation to y'all and make sure we leave lots of time to answer questions later on. As Tracy said, I'm Mark Bigelow. I lead the risk adjustment and quality work here at EXL. I'm joined by Varun Pandarathal. At EXL, our goal is to make sense of data to drive business forward. We really like challenges. We like to do things that other people think can't be done. We're doing that. We'll talk about how we've done that today in the context of risk adjustment, but just a quick overview about the company. We have 6,000 plus healthcare professionals working for us. For a large publicly traded company. Lots of doctors and nurses, data scientists, coders. We have 260 million lives or data for those lives in our system. And we work with 6 of the top 10 health plans, 2 of the top 3 PBMs, thousands of employer groups represented, and we work with lots of life sciences companies. And specific to today's presentation, our risk adjustment work was recently recognized by the KLAS organization as best in class for 2022. We care a lot about what our clients' experience is and driving excellent results for them in collaboration with them. So we like to be flexible and work with them to build a solution that makes the most sense for their business. I'll tell you about the client that we're going to talk about today. It's a client with a large Medicare population, and they have a lot of value-based contracts. They're a not-for-profit. They have over 130 different community practices and 835 physicians and professionals that serve 120,000 Medicare patients. They're using the Medicare ACO model. And just a quick overview, in case you're not familiar, it requires physicians and other practitioners to provide care coordination with the goal of improving patient outcomes and reducing costs. So there's some reporting requirements around that. It's a little bit different than just straight MA risk adjustment. And there's a gain share arrangement with Medicare where the ACO will receive a portion of any savings that result from reducing costs while meeting the quality requirements. So that's sort of an overview of the client and how they're set up and the situation that they have, or the arrangement they have with Medicare. So we have the client obviously had some challenges. So I'm going to turn it over to Varun to talk about the challenges and what we did to help them.
Hey, thanks, Mark. So one of the key challenges that this client was facing was they did not have clear visibility into what their actual risk-bearing populations' risk scores were and how their clinicians or physicians were performing when it came to risk recapture, documentation accuracy, and such. Now, they were also, when we started this engagement, they were also at this juncture where more of the, they had 2 broad LOBs. One was the Medicare ACO, the MSSP ACO, and they also had a lot of contracts with Medicare Advantage plans. So they were at a stage where they were contemplating taking on more risk with the Medicare Advantage plans, as well as stepping into the higher tracks for the MSSP ACO population. So at this stage, what they were really focused on was getting a handle on what the risk of their population was, on what the populations were actually. And the other thing, the final thing was they had projected pretty significant growth in both their MA and their ACO populations over the next few years. Again, this is around when we started the engagement with them. Next slide, please, Mark. So to address these unique challenges, what we developed for them over a over a few years of association working with their risk-bearing population, was 5 broad solutions or 5 broad strategies that work in tandem with each other. We at EXL believe that risk adjustment is not there's no magic bullet that can fix risk adjustment. It's not a one-time fix, but instead it's something that you need to keep repeatedly doing and honing your skills, making sure that your risk is recaptured accurately, the correct amount, the documentation accuracy is up to scratch, and also continually evolve your analytics so as to better your risk adjustment performance. So we evolved this strategy, we evolved these 5 levers and how they interact operationally over a period of 3 to 4 years. And what I talk through over the next few slides would be how they interact and what were the results this client was able to achieve. Now, talking briefly about the 5 levers, and again, these are in no specific order, but starting with making suspects and gaps available at the point of care. I think this is something that a lot of physician groups struggle with, especially considering the varied technology environments, both centrally and at individual provider offices. So how do we make suspects recapture opportunities available to the physician at the point of care during the encounter? The second one was actionable analytics. They were very clear that they did not want a bunch of reports or any fancy dashboards just told them that something was wrong, but they wanted our help in determining how do you take that analytics, interpret it, and how do we fit that into their operations. The third one, and a very important solution lever, is bidirectional risk adjustment. Now, we are doing retrospective, prospective, and concurrent reviews for this client. The retrospective especially, we look at risk adjustment both ways, adds and deletes, so as to ensure that only the right risk levels are represented to CMS. The fourth one, again, a very critical lever, and I have a few slides on this later on, targeted physician education for documentation improvement. And the entire goal of this is to ensure physician engagement with the programs. The clinicians understand why risk adjustment is important and how do we get their patients' data as examples to show them that'll help improve risk adjustment and documentation accuracy. And finally, how do you prioritize your cohort? With the MSSP ACO, it can get a little tricky because attribution can change very frequently and very fast. So how do you make sure that your high priority patients are scheduled for the beginning of the year so you have more time to recapture risk for those patients? These were the 5 broad solution levers that we developed. And like I said, this wasn't something that we were able to achieve overnight, but this is something that we achieved through true collaboration with this client, wherein they partnered with us. We were able to ask questions of their data, come up with strategies and test those strategies in their operational setting, and then have the time to demonstrate that there are results that can be achieved by implementing the actions that we defined. Mark, next slide, please. Yeah, this is a brief snapshot of the journey. We started year 1 of the program with a small cohort of members. We said we'd show you value. So we kind of ran that year, most of that year, as a proof of value concept, where we did retrospective chart reviews. We did pilots, a pilot program around provider education. And then what we did was we were looking at annual wellness visit effectiveness tracking, essentially using analytics and the data they were able to supply us with to check as to how much of risk was truly recaptured and how much documentation accuracy was adhered to during the annual wellness visits. The annual wellness visits being one of those encounters that gives the clinician a lot of time with the patient compared to a lot of the other encounters, and where we at least believe that there is maximum opportunity to diagnose and recapture risk from a risk adjustment standpoint. As you see, we started with a small cohort of 5,000 members. We showed results through retrospective chart reviews, through provider education and the effectiveness tracking analytics. And then we expanded in year 2, where we proposed a pilot program for both prospective and concurrent. So we took a separate track of patients and we said, let's prioritize them, let's schedule these patients and then do prospective reviews before the encounter, and then follow that up with concurrent reviews right after the encounter to ensure that maximum of our recommendations are accurately documented, and also get real-time feedback from the clinician as to what conditions were truly present or not. That was a very successful pilot that we then scaled across year 3. And then year 4, as you can see, the population also increased. Their risk-bearing, the cohort that we work with are all the BBC population or any of the risk-bearing population and under the Medicare Advantage and the MSSP ACO tracks. They have a larger fee-for-service Medicare population as well, as you saw in some of the earlier slides. Some other aspects that we integrated into the program was a lot of custom analytics that focused on tracking the effectiveness of these programs. How do we quantify that the retrospective reviews, the submissions actually made it all the way to CMS, and CMS acknowledged the receipt and acknowledged the appropriate HCC that was submitted as supplemental data to CMS? How do we quantify the accuracy of our findings or our recommendations in the prospective reviews, and what percentage of those reviews or of those recommendations were actually translated into the into the medical record during the encounter, and then finally made it onto a bill for the prospective plus concurrent track. And then one of the other things was, how do you quantify, or how do you show that all the provider education that you're doing, that you're investing in, has actually yielded results? And we were able to develop strategies for all of this. Again, analytics-backed strategies. And what we did from year 3 onwards was also add more patient vulnerability stratification. We brought in additional data sources to further enhance our analytics and provide a more robust patient profile and more robust analytics. And finally, in year 4, which was actually previous year, we improved on our track record, which we'd show you, and we expanded the provider education support to also include specialists from year 1 to year 3. We were focusing on primary care mainly. We reached a stage where we felt that we could focus on specialists and also try to educate them on documentation accuracy. So that's what happened in year 4, and we are right now we are quantifying those results, and we expect pretty significant uptick in RAF thanks to the specialist education that was performed. Hey, if there are any questions about the strategies, the tracks that we've adopted, please feel free to drop that question in the chat, and we can answer it as we go through the slides. Next slide, please, Mark. Right. This is a view or a schematic of what we do today and how this has come together. Starting at the bottom, everything that we do for all of our clients is firmly grounded in data. We have a best-in-class technology platform that helps with excellent data analytics, building profiles at various levels, and developing those reports and those prioritization lists that can then be actioned upon. We work off a variety of data feeds, predominantly claims, CMS return files. We intake CCLF files for the ACOs, and bring this information together, a best-in-class ETL process that normalizes this data and then helps us create profiles and associated reports. The technology platform, the core technology platform, also houses our analytics engine, which then which then leads into the services aspect of it. So all of the services that we had defined and what our client now also does outside of the scope of work that EXL is delivering is user analytics and then operationalize it. For example, coding services, how do you use data to pick the most high value members, high priority charts or providers, prospective and concurrent, the same, how do you prioritize the members on a, at the beginning of the year or actually towards the end of the previous year, we start a prioritization process in December itself. So we have actionable lists ready to go starting January for scheduling into the first quarter. And then the next step would be consolidating these findings, the chart review findings that you see. And these findings are then disseminated in three broad ways. One, we use that to for our provider education content that we curate. We definitely, all the supplemental data that's generated is taken and submitted to the health plans, and one track of it goes into the EMR, where we make sure that this is available either in the EMR or at the provider's office during the time of the encounter. What we believe is very critical for the success of this is ensuring those feedback loops exist, that at every step we have feedback loops, feedback mechanisms, be it clinician feedback, be it feedback from the health plans, CMS return files being used as feedback, that all goes back into our analytics engine. And this helps optimize future targeting, future prioritization, and any sort of reporting that we do. We also track what we call a missed opportunity that's unearthed through our coding track, where we look at what were conditions that may have been documented but could not be documented because of lack of meet or tamper in the medical record. So what we do is we take those missed opportunities, like we call them, and we cycle that into the next year. These are mainly chronic HCCs, so we recycle that in the next year and have them re-evaluated during the prospective review for that patient in the following year. What that does is that helps ensure that an opportunity that was identified or a suspect that was generated was not lost. It's kept in the system, it's tagged to that patient, and we represent that to the provider or the clinician to reevaluate for the validity of that condition, for the currency of that condition, and then code accordingly. So this is a broad schematic of how we operate today and how we're able to deliver value to this client on an ongoing basis. Next slide, please. Okay, so the next few slides are going to look at results and what we were able to achieve through this phased and continuous optimization process for the risk adjustment track. So here in year one, we started off at pretty, and this is what this chart shows you is the improvement in the average HCC score, not the total risk score of the population, but just the HCC component that we can influence through accurate coding and documentation, and through all the other tracks like provider education that we're able to drive. So if you notice in year one, we started off at about 0.2 for the entire population, and that has now more than doubled to 0.473, and as of 2022, we expect those numbers to be even higher. There was a little drop, and that was due to the low number of encounters during COVID, but that should this year should negate that. But as you can see, year one is where we consider where we baseline ourselves. We say, okay, this was based on the prior year's work. This is what we were able to baseline against, and then every subsequent year, there has been marked improvement in the risk score or the RAF score, the HCC RAF scores for the population. The orange bars indicate the continuously eligible members. So these are members who've carried on with the population, and then the gray bars are the average of the total population. If you notice in year one, there was a significant difference, but in year two and year three onwards, especially when the prospective and concurrent reviews kicked in, along with the AWV scheduling, the patient visit scheduling, we ensured that the new members who come in get seen at the earliest possible opportunity, and whatever information that we have, we ensure that we carry that forward through the prospective and concurrent reviews and capture as much risk as possible. The other obvious metric to track would be the rate of suspected HCC gaps and their closure on a quarter. What we have here is on a quarter-on-quarter basis. This chart may be missing a few labels, but at the bottom, this was year one, and then progressively it's year two above that, and year three right at the top. As you can see, their population also increased, and so did the number of suspected open gaps year on year. But even though the sheer quantum of gaps increased, we were able to help close, or at least help prioritize the patients and then get them to close more progressively a larger percentage of those gaps. So in pure volumes, the gaps closed in year three would be much more, or would be like 3 or 4x the total open gaps in year one. What we have is a 5-quarter view here that may look odd, but typically we give it 1 extra quarter for the claims run out and for us to get all the data in, so we can show projections. We can accurately project how many gaps were successfully closed. And in year 4, we expect this number, that 70%, to be almost 85%. And our target over the next few years is to push it to as close as 90% as possible. Here, it's about how we were able to drive 3 strategies when it comes to chart reviews. We started small. We started with the retrospective reviews alone, and we piloted with the retrospective reviews, and then the following year we started the prospective and concurrent reviews. As you can see, the table at the top talks about the retrospective reviews and average number of members that we reviewed. Again, this was very targeted. We were very conscious that we didn't want to go chase every chart that was available, but we wanted to pick the most valuable members and also identify the clinicians whose patient panel would have had the maximum opportunity. We created the intersection of these two, and then went after the charts that we wanted to relook at in the retrospective. And as you can see, in year 4, we started finding lesser charts to chase, lesser charts that we needed to chase, and also a drop in the net new findings. The average net new findings was I wouldn't say 0.1, but very close to 0.1. And in year 4 is when it has started dropping. And this we attribute to as a direct impact of having a very tight prospective and concurrent review prospective and concurrent review program. What that does is that helps capture risk early on in the year during the encounter itself, and go towards almost minimizing or eliminating the need for retrospective reviews on the whole. For this client, we don't believe it would be completely possible to eliminate, but what we want to do is drive it down to the bare minimum that's required and only focus on retrospective reviews for new clinicians, the clinicians who are new to the health system, or those clinicians who need constant monitoring around provider education. With the prospective and concurrent reviews, and this is the table at the bottom, how we track progress is we quantify the the risk scores or the HCCs that we have recommended from during the prospective reviews, and then during the concurrent review phase, a human coder goes back in and reviews the encounter and documents what percentage of the pre-audit or the prospective visit recommendations were carried forward, and any other clinician notes that pertain to conditions that were that are marked as resolved, or any feedback that they don't agree with a certain recommendation for code are also taken into account, and that's recycled back to the analytics engine for further sharpening of the pencils when it comes to patient targeting and provider profiling. And as you can see, it's not just doing these strategies independently that works, and we strongly believe that these 4 or 5 strategies together, implemented in tandem, have the maximum impact. And what you can see is, as we press down on that pedal with provider education, focusing on documentation accuracy, what has happened, as you can see, is there's been a greater uptake by the clinicians to the recommendations that were provided to them, and there's been improved coding or improved risk recapture as the years go by. Right now, around 60% of everything that is recommended is recaptured in the post-visit. So this is a snapshot of our the chart reviews and how these 3 strategies work together to improve performance. Next slide, please. When it comes to provider education, the sort of support that we provide, and here again, like I said, it's been a collaborative partnership with this client of ours, where we curate content for provider education, and our client's central team, the value-based care team, actually goes out and meets with providers who we identify or who we shortlist as being eligible candidates for documentation accuracy education sessions. We use a variety of data sources, provider profiles, what our coders find and recommend, RAF information, the gap and suspect information, the AWV effectiveness program that we do. We churn that through our analytics engine, and we spit out 3 broad tools for the provider to support provider education. So one is the provider scorecard. That's something that they give access to the provider to. So the clinician, after their education sessions or after their group education sessions, can continually track how their performance is, how they're doing when it comes to recapture rates, and also they can compare themselves against a blinded peer group of clinicians of similar panel size, or clinicians who were not coding or documenting a certain HCC or a certain cohort of HCCs, or who had similar coding patterns. So that way, the providers, the clinicians, are aware of how their performance is, and can always rely on that as a ready reckoner. The second piece is curated content. And here, what helps is, since we also support the coding strategy, we also support the AWE prioritization strategy, we're able to curate examples from the clinician's own patient panel, as both examples of good coding practices and also examples of areas where a clinician may need to improve. And finally, we provide the central value-based care team a host of provider performance tracking tools with which they are able to track the effectiveness of the education sessions that they've engaged in. And what they can also do is they can decide if they want to reprioritize education sessions for a certain provider or group of providers later on in the year. I see a question in the chat, and I'm going to try and answer that right now. How do I decide to target retrospectively if we're performing concurrent prospective? Okay, so the retrospective risk adjustment is we're not able to target all the clinicians or all providers and help them get to that level of coding accuracy that we want. So what we do is it's kind of an intersection of looking at patients with high value suspected gaps and also identifying clinicians who have not the best coding accuracy amongst their patient panel. We create a cross section of these two cohorts and identify the common members that we want to take, and then we use that that group as target for retrospective reviews. The concurrent and prospective reviews is also a behavioral change. So as you saw in a couple of slides before, it takes 12 months to about 18 months of feedback of being in touch with clinicians to help them understand the importance of coding and accept more of the prospective review recommendations that are coming through, and also engage with the entire process, the ecosystem that's established to support them. And as you saw, as the uptake of the prospective reviews, as in when more and more of the recommendations were actually being looked at and being coded, what we also notice is that the need for retrospective reviews starts to drop. The ideal world that we want to be in is where we have direct EMR integration, and the moment an encounter is over, we are able to code it either using machine learning and a combination of human coders, and kind of completely move away from the need for any retrospective chart chases. So I hope I was able to answer that question. And next slide, please, Mark. Okay. So here, this is an example of one of the earliest clinicians who we focused on because he had a large panel, attributed patient panel. So as you can see, he has continuously improved between 2017 and 2020. His HCC score has increased by 32%. This is much lower than the overall population's increase, but his panel size, attributed panel size, was big and also had a lot of churn. So this was, again, consistent year-on-year improvement and year-on-year clinician education that resulted in this. But what is also important is that we are able to pinpoint that as of 2020, he was able to close 69% of the open gaps, which was much higher than the gap closure percentage for the entire population. So the average gap closure percentage across the population. As you can see, the total attributed members and the average HCC LAF scores painted in the right-hand side chart. And the next slide, Mark. What we also do is we also try to look at the number of changes that our coders were recommending on this clinician's charts. And if you notice, between 2019 and 2020, the number of changes that the coders were recommending dropped significantly by about 20%, even though we reviewed 15%, we targeted 15% more members of the panel for this clinician. So this was again proof in the data that the clinician education, the support that we were giving for documentation accuracy improvement, and hereby I mean the combined team of the client and EXL was extending to these clinicians was working. And even the average changes per member, if you remember, for retrospective reviews, we do bidirectional risk adjustment. So we do both adds and deletes, and we look at every encounter that we have access to. So we don't limit it to just risk adjustment. We look at total documentation accuracy, and on an average, changes per member also dropped by about 30% between 2019 and 2020 for this clinician. And we also looked at how the recapture rates improved and how the average changes per member when it came to recapture opportunities changed as well. And everywhere across the board, there was performance improvement. And this clinician in 2021 has become one of the top performing clinicians across the panel. And with his size of attributed patients, it's been a good kicker to the overall recapture percentages. So I think this is where this was the last of the results and how the strategies came together. So over to you, Mark.
Thanks. Thank you, Varun. And just real quick, if anybody has any questions, please go ahead and drop those in the comments. I see one just got added about incentives. Varun, do we incentivize the providers at all to give time for the education?
No, we do not. Right now, we do not. This is something that we have discussed, but if for this client, for this program, we do not provide any incentives for the education.
And I think one of the advantages of having an own physician network where the client owns the physicians is that they can build these things into their incentive structures and into the compensation structure that way, so that external incentives aren't needed. Is that right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Other questions? Go ahead and drop those in the comments. Otherwise, I'm going to keep going and talk a little bit about the future of where we're going to go with this client. And to give some context to this, one of the things I want to make clear is at EXL, we're really passionate about building the future of risk adjustment. And one of the things that we see in solving some of these problems that we have in risk adjustment is that a lot of solutions that we've used in our careers and they're out there involve adding risk adjustment and quality as a separate process to the care process. And one of the things we want to make sure that we're doing is building the world that we want to live in, right? The world where physicians can just provide care and they have all of the data and tools necessary within the workflow they have to provide the right care and close these quality and risk adjustment gaps at the same time without having to do separate processes for those things. So to do that, one of the things that Varun talked about is EMR integration. We want to make sure that we can do bidirectional EMR integration so that we don't have to provide a separate portal for the providers to look at. They can just do the work in the workflow that their group has set up for them and just keep providing the care they're used to providing. We also want to add in NLP supported chart reviews and doing away with retrospective reviews, excuse me. The reason being, we think that the retrospective review process, and this is a personal mission of mine, is that it's a really cumbersome process that literally nobody involved likes. The physicians don't like it, health plans don't like it, risk adjustment operators don't like it, but it's something that has to be done. So our goal is to build a world where retrospective reviews just aren't necessary, at least minimize them as much as possible. And that can be done with the support of NLP chart reviews. So ideally, the process that we're envisioning in conjunction with what Varun has just talked about with the prospective concurrent chart reviews is by having an EMR integration bidirectionally and having an NLP supported chart review. What we can do is have when a patient comes in, the physician does their work in their workflow, the data comes back to us. We review that with our NLP and with a coder, and then we return those findings back to the group, whether it's a delete that needs to happen or whether it's an add that needs to happen to make the encounter complete and accurate. And the encounter gets submitted to CMS. We retain a copy of that chart so that we have an archive for when RADV season comes around or when retrospective review time comes around if that's needed. So there's no chasing that needs to get done. And then we also know, because of the review process, the concurrent review process, everything that's been submitted to CMS is supported by that chart. So when RADV time comes around, there's no RADV risk at all. Everything that's been submitted is supported, and we have that chart in-house right away. That way, a lot of our time can be spent working with physicians, engaging them, helping them and providing them with the tools they need and getting barriers out of their way to be successful, instead of trying to find charts and doing this process that we don't like. So those are the next steps for our client here, is to get rid of those retrospective reviews for them as much as possible, and then bring in our NLP and AI engine to do some chart reviews for them to help with their process. And so this is what I talked about at the beginning. We're passionate about helping our clients and building a solution that fits their needs. We leverage the breadth of our healthcare expertise. And in this example, around risk adjustment and quality, to help this group build a solution that matched what their goals were, what their processes were, and met them where they were at the time 4 years ago, and then grew with them so that they could build the organization that they wanted and the processes they wanted organically and with our help. Now, we can also apply this solution for health plans. It's a little bit different, right? Because health plans work with hundreds of provider groups. And so we also do this solution for health plans, working with their provider groups. It's most effective, obviously, where there's a VBC relationship, because then the provider group is as engaged as the health plan is, and their goals are aligned. And then we can provide them with digital engagement solutions, because one of the most difficult challenges health plans have is interfacing with lots of different provider groups and getting data from them in a consistent format, getting charts from them in a timely fashion. And EXL can join that relationship and break down a lot of those barriers to get data and handle a lot of those things electronically, so that providers and health plans don't have to spend their time trying to solve tech problems, and can actually work on focusing on risk adjustment and quality strategy. Now there's a question in the comments here I'm gonna answer. It says, what does the process and timeline look like if you find diagnosis codes that need to be added and deleted during your real-time review? So the answer to that question is, that's done. We typically get, and Varun, correct me if I say anything wrong here, but we like to get the encounter and the chart from the visit within 48 hours of the visit. And then at that point, we run the chart through the NLP and compare it to the encounter that we've been given, and look for any gaps, whether that's HCCs that were in the chart or written in the chart but not coded on the encounter, or vice versa, HCCs that are on the encounter but don't have support in the chart. We look both ways, and then get that data back to the group. And we try to get that turned around as quickly as possible. What's the typical turnaround time on that, Varun? I think it's fairly quickly, isn't it?
Yeah, the turnaround time for our reviews is 48 to 72 hours after the encounter, and timeline between seeing implementation, actual meaningful improvement, we'd say anywhere between 12 and 18 months, just given the sweep cycles and CMS payment cycles.
Got it. Thank you. And then you asked about finding insufficient documentation. Are we able to have the provider amend it? That's really up to the provider group's policies around how long after a visit they're able to amend the record. And we'll follow those policies, whatever the provider group is comfortable with and what policies they've set. But we do give the feedback in as timely and quickly a way as we can, so that they can decide what to do from there. Another question that says that the pilot prospective and concurrent process was implemented in program year 2 at 15,000 plus members. For a Medicare Advantage plan that has less than 1,000 members, would you recommend piloting a prospective and concurrent process immediately, or aiming for a larger population? Varun, that seems to be up your alley. What do you think?
Hey, sorry, Mark, you cut out there for a moment. Could you repeat that question?
Oh, sure. Sorry about that. Basically, we implemented prospective and concurrent with 15,000 plus members in program year 2. Mm-hmm. For a Medicare Advantage plan with less than 1,000 members, would you recommend piloting prospective and concurrent immediately, or would you wait until there's a larger population?
No, with a smaller population, it's easier. I mean, it's how we look at it with population sizes. Again, we prioritize members, and then we chase the most high value members and clinicians who have the highest potential to improve their risk scores. With a smaller population, it makes it much more manageable, and scheduling becomes a lot more easier. So absolutely, it doesn't matter if you have 100 members or 1,000 members. You can easily implement the program. You can be more effective. And what you can do is not limit it to just a certain type of visit, but for example, any primary care visit could then be channeled into this entire prospective plus concurrent workflow.
Yeah, I'll add on to that. One of the reasons we like fitting ourselves in this process into the existing workflow of the group is to minimize the implementation time and the amount of training that's involved, training around the process versus training around coding. So if you imagine that you're a physician and one day you come in and you're told, hey, there's a new system you have to use your EMR, but also document in this system, and then try to make sure that what you document in the EMR is the same as what's documented. It's a lot of training, a lot of work. But imagine if you're a physician and you come in and one day your problem list all of a sudden just has all the data you need to look for in an exam. Yesterday, it didn't have all that stuff. Today, it's a complete and accurate list that you need to go through and address each of those HCCs and quality gaps. So it's exactly the same system you're used to. So a lot less training is involved. The pilot can go a lot more smoothly if you want to do a pilot. And you can, again, keep the physician focused on doing his work. So yeah, that's the goal of us trying to make sure we fit this into the process and the workflow that's there. And it sounds like somebody had a question on slide 13. So let me skip back to that about the data on slide 13. The question just says, please explain the bottom data from slide 13.
Okay, so the bottom data, the first row in the second table identifies the RAF that was added or recommended in the prospective reviews. So this says, typically in a prospective review, what we do is we look at anywhere between 18 to 24 months of historical data, encounter data that we have for the member, and then we generate a list of suspects or gap recapture opportunities, and then identify the associated HCC RAF lift that 100% recapture of that can provide. Now, this is presented to the clinician. And of course, we don't present any numbers. We just present suspected HCCs that they need to evaluate the patient for. Now, after the encounter, what our coders, the human coder does in this case, is goes in and determines of the HCCs that were recommended, what percentage of it, or if any, was captured or accurately documented. Now, what the concurrent review provides us with an opportunity for is also evaluate if there were any new conditions not previously associated with a member that have been documented by the clinician or could be documented by the clinician, and also understand how much of the prospective recommendations were accurately documented or carried forward. And so what you see is if we recommend, say, diabetes, and we recommend, say, CHF, or suspect diabetes and CHF to be evaluated for the patient, and the doc says no CHF, it's only diabetes, and documents diabetes in the encounter, then that's what makes it the post-audit. So the difference between the pre-audit and the post-audit is those HCCs that are either not completely accurately documented, or those HCCs that are rejected by the clinician. I hope that helps explain your question.
Thanks, Varun. That's great. These are great questions too. So if anybody has any other questions, please feel free to drop them in the comments. Okay. So again, EXL helps to summarize. We're named best in class this year for risk adjustment, with A's and A+ on just about every measure. 100% of our customers said that we keep all of our promise. 100% of the customers said they would buy EXL Clarity, our analytics product, again. We love working with different clients, solving different problems. And again, we really want to make sure that the solution works for each of our clients in the best way possible and drives the best results. I will open it up for the last minute here, just for any other questions, and then we can close. Oh, great question. Thank you. Yeah, so any thoughts on how you share suspect information with the providers prior to the patient's appointment? This is, again, where we try to fit into the existing workflow. So one thing we try to do is have with EMR integration, it's much easier. We can get the a broad swath of data in advance of the visit. So this is typically encounter data, lab, pharmacy. We can get claim data, or chart data, anything like that, and review and try to get as broad a picture of all the different HCCs as possible, and bring in the probability that those HCCs will be real. And then according to our clients' desires, we'll cut off that probability where they want to, and then assess those HCCs and get them into the EMR before the visit. We typically like to do that work 2 weeks before the visit to make sure that everything gets done in time and all the data is there for the provider when the visit happens. And then if there's no desire for EMR integration, we can do it other ways. We can provide a data extract to the client in whatever format they want. Again, trying to hit that 2-week window. So we're really flexible in terms of the way that we deliver the results to our clients.
And Mark, I'd also just like to add, some of our clients, we provide, we do direct email messages that we send to the doctor's office. Again, either 24 or 48 hours before the scheduled encounter. So we create a template or a format that's signed off by the health system, and then we use that to share the suspects. There have been some clients who've requested for a shared folder in which we can drop this information that the clinics should pick it up. Like Mark said, we are open to, we're open to working in multiple ways in which we can get this information across, either online or traditional offline. Even if it's paper, we'll be able to do that.
I'm glad you brought that up. Thank you. I missed that. Other questions? Okay. We'll really appreciate everybody's attention and engagement. What method of provider education is best? That's a great question. And we kind of leave that up to the clients to determine what works best for them. They typically have a provider education process going. We try to fit into that, but we can do basically any modality and any frequency or type of education, whether that's a video, a fax that goes out, a one-on-one discussion with the provider, or if the client wants to do the training and we provide them the data around that, we can do that. Varun, in your experience working with our clients, what have you found?
So what usually works is, at least what we've seen across, and again, not limited to just this client, across other clients we work as well, they do for the top, looking across their panel, they identify the top missing conditions and then do kind of capstone sessions or something similar to groups. They divide them into cohorts and do these sessions. And then the next step are those one-on-one education sessions, which we find to be very impactful. And what really helps is using examples from the patient population attributed to that clinician. So that clinician relates to the condition, understands or can justify as to why he or she documents or recommends a certain condition does not. And that is something that's been very effective in my experience.
Fantastic. Any other questions? We have a couple minutes left, so happy to answer any other questions. Yeah, it's a great question. Do we see provider groups willing to engage if they do not have risk-based contracts? It's a bigger lift usually to get providers to engage without a risk-based contract. One of the things when I was on the health plan, I used to work at Molina Healthcare, and one of the conversations I would have with provider groups around that, if they were just fee for service, and they'd ask, why should I participate in this? We offered an incentive per member for every annual wellness visit that was completed. That was part of it. But we'd also talk about how, we're trying to have a relationship here, and we have these contract discussions every year, and we want to have an ongoing healthy relationship. And every year we understand that you're looking for a rate increase, and every year we want to give you one, but without engagement and risk adjustment and quality, the funds aren't going to be there to fund those contract increases that we all want to give. So even fee for service providers can have some skin in the game in the sense that without accurate funding to cover the conditions that do exist, there's going to be a gap there somewhere. So that's the approach that I've typically taken. Varun, what about you?
I agree with you, Mark. It is generally slightly more difficult to engage if there are no risk-based contracts.
Other questions? If after this you do have any other questions, do feel free to contact us at any time. I think, Tracy, you'll have some contact details that'll go out. Is that right? Or the presentation will go out?
Yeah, so just a reminder, if anybody did join in a little bit later than 1:30, we will be sending over a copy of the presentation deck as well as the webinar recording. We'll be sending that out to y'all via email once it is available for you to look at in the member portal. But if anybody does have any other questions, feel free to submit them to us right now. As long as you haven't submitted them in advance, I can make sure that they get over to the speakers, Mark and Varun, and they can reach out to you personally to answer those questions if anybody else does have them. So feel free to send those over really quickly. But I do want to give everyone a big thank you for attending today. A big thank you to our speakers for joining us, and of course, EXL Health for helping facilitate today's webinar. So thank you all again, everyone. Feel free to submit those questions. I am going to be launching the member experience poll here in a second for y'all to fill out. I promise it's really, really short. But thank you all again for attending. And until next time, I hope you all enjoy the rest of your week or weekends. Bye, everyone.